akustik kalau sound lebih ke Didn't made it one. I started a beatbox. Yeah, 30 minutes time. No, thanks, guys. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to meet you. Get some sleep. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Well, thank you very much for that appalling photograph of mine that you just presented to everyone. So, I think my name is John Denton. I'm the Secretary General of the International Chamber of Commerce based in Paris. And it's a great pleasure to be with you all today. I look at the clock ticking away. I've got about 15 minutes. I actually am in the midst of a global campaign on the need for legal recognition of negotiable instruments which are digitally transferred across borders, because this is a huge deficiency in the moment in the global world. I've actually been running a campaign with the G7, with the G20. On Thursday, I launched a similar campaign with the Asia Pacific Economic Community. And tomorrow I'm taking this cause to the Paris Peace Forum. And so I wanted to use the opportunity today to deliver some formal remarks because I'm using this opportunity to actually push this whole case. And these remarks that I'll be delivering today will become part of the formal campaign that we're running as well. So bear with me as there are some issues I want to carry over. But before I do, I want to thank Vasilisa very much for your support, and congratulations on organizing such an impressive conference. It's great for me to be here in Barcelona today. We've been working quite closely with CBC to actually explore some of the opportunities with blockchain, with what we do at the ICC. And so it's not my first trip to Barcelona, and nor will it be my last, particularly given the focus in this city on digitization, blockchain, on creating spaces for entrepreneurialism. All these elements are very dear to heart of ICC. Digital innovations of this caliber have an undeniable economic and social impact, and that's very important for us. And what's really important for us is the promise of economic inclusion. What you don't necessarily understand about the International Chamber of Commerce is that we have been around for 100 years. We were founded in the death throes of the First World War, and we were created by industrialists who took a view that when governments could not cooperate, it was up to businesses to stand up and lead where they could. And the underlying ethos of the ICC is that business united, business enabled, is capable of actually enabling peace, prosperity, and opportunity for all. So we are deeply committed to issues around economic inclusion. We are in more than 110 countries as the ICC. We're basically in every corner of the world through the chambers of commerce, which form part of us. We have more than 50 million businesses that are actually comprising of the ICC. And interestingly, I took over 3 years ago. I'm the first Australian to lead the ICC. I've made it my mission to ensure that we also are properly represented in the developing and emerging economies. And we now comprise of all our membership, more than 2/3 are in developing and emerging economies. In fact, this morning, I had a meeting with the Pacific Island Forum, who've actually asked us also to take on leadership and support them in the Pacific Island. My aim is to ensure that we, as a not-for-profit, for-purpose organization, institution of 100 years, is able to bring the voice of business, of the real economy, into global policy and discussions. In fact, when you think about it, we're actually the world's largest second-track diplomatic platform. We can have ICC in Syria in the same room as ICC Israel. We can have ICC China sitting down with ICC USA, because we're all committed to the same purpose. We are actually purpose-led. We are not member-driven. So it's this connection to the global business community that gives me certainty about the importance of innovation to advance global trade. We are super excited about digital opportunities. We run a campaign globally to make technology work for all. In fact, I'm in the midst of another campaign, which is to digitize 5 million SMEs in the African continent, working very closely with the leadership of the African Continental Free Trade Area. And now I'm actually being asked to take that campaign and launch it again, but for Central America. So we are deeply devoted to the idea of inclusion with the digital world and making technology work for all. And ICC is committed to facilitate collaboration among key stakeholders in our role as the leading neutral voice and the only truly global neutral platform. And that's something I'll come back to later. It's very important for us to maintain our neutrality in this. We are not choosing within a potentially bifurcated digital platform. We will actually always maintain a neutral role in this and aligned only to our purpose. So we share the spirit of democracy for all. In fact, I enjoyed the dinner here last night. To hear some of the libertarian views is always interesting, but also the deep commitment to inclusiveness, which was represented by those who are actually serious about democracy for all, and also about the aim, and I've heard some of the discussion, I just heard part of the panel there, about making technologies accessible and ensure we seize their full potential and that we do not leave anyone behind and we avoid the creation of silos. ICC is working with partners worldwide to achieve these objectives. In April last year, I launched the Digital Standards Initiative, which I created out of our digital hub, our innovation hub in Singapore. We're doing this with the Asian Development Bank and the government of Singapore. The idea is to lead and coordinate efforts in digital trade standards and protocols. We've also created multiple tools for SMEs because our view is that given that 98% of most regional economies comprise SMEs, accounting for almost 60 to 70% of employment. If we do not support them in the transition, if we do not support them with access, if we do not enable them to be included in this, then we will never, ever achieve technology for all. And so you actually have to get into the weeds, which is what we do to ensure that we can create a garden in which they can flourish. So we create public goods like the software as service ICC SME 360X, which allows SMEs easily to assess their environmental impact and help them do things about it. And actually we incentivize them by once they do that and they actually are accredited through the ICC, we're able to give them access to lower cost finance. And frankly, access to supply chains, because traceability is becoming so key for access to supply and value chains. And without an identity, without a recognition that the way in which you produce your goods and deliver your services is actually sustainable, then you will not be able to have access to those supply chains. And let's not forget, there is a moral negative in that if we're not able to help people, because if you can't access those supply chains, because you cannot show that you've actually accredited to do so, then your value will decrease. And we've already seen instances where, particularly in Indonesia and elsewhere, SMEs or traders with the inability to actually show that they're sustainably accredited have actually seen the value of their land holdings decrease, and guess who buys them up? The very supply chains that are actually seeking to actually have the accreditation. So our view is it's a moral compulsion for us to ensure that SMEs have access to this tool. And frankly, it's a disgrace that international organizations and regional organizations and many large companies have not actually done the same thing. That's where the ICC steps up. And we keep exploring the potential for smart contracts. Don't forget that it was the ICC in the midst of the 1930s, in the midst of the rise of fascism, in the midst of the rise of totalitarianism, it actually stepped forward to create a way of the world continuing to operate through actually establishing commercial terms that could operate across borders. It's the famous ICC Incoterms, which are used now in almost all transactions on a global basis, and we curate that. But we also want to curate that for the 21st century, and one of our obligations then is to ensure we take Incoterms and create that into a smart contracting model as well. And that's something we've been exploring in Barcelona because of the depth of knowledge here. And we're looking at a number of options about how we do that. But we take responsibility for curation of these fundamental terms that enable global commerce to flow very seriously. And so we're always seeking to ensure that what we create matches the context in which we operate. So our work makes us realize the importance of effective private sector cooperation. Let's be clear, data silos hinder trade and trade finance processes, and fragmentation gets in the way of interoperability and legal recognition. Meanwhile, the future of both global trade and local economies depends on their inclusion in functioning digital 21st century economy. Today in this forum, bringing together stakeholders and policymakers, I wanted to share a few insights with you. I wanted to speak about the main challenges to make digital innovation work for all and about how to tackle them. I want to begin by mentioning interoperability. Digitization has often been enacted through bilateral agreements between institutions using a specific platform. This has led to the creation of digital islands. We need universal standards to connect the existing digital islands, enabling market forces to improve customer experience. Without effective linkages, there will be no scale and there will be no global adoption. And I know that has been a mantra about the need for global adoption here. But unless there is actually linkages, that scale, which is critical for global adoption, will not come forth. And some of the benefits and many of the opportunities of the digital platform will be lost. So to promote open digital trade, we need an open, interoperable platform with trade standards to support it. Interoperability means greater inclusiveness and efficiency, avoiding duplication of efforts. Blockchain-based networks can expand business opportunities when they capitalize on efficiency and build on inclusiveness. The second challenge I want to address is creating secure digital ecosystems. When thinking about bringing different players into a global interconnected economy, we must not forget that MSMEs and SMEs are especially vulnerable to cybersecurity risks. These entities don't always operate as independent entities, but as integral parts of the global supply chain. And often as the weakest link in that chain, they can become easy targets for cyber attacks. These vulnerable points generate a ripple effect affecting the entire system. Policymakers and global decision makers and global value chain leaders must support SMEs in their digital transformation. They need to strengthen their capacity and provide cybersecurity training. They do not do that at scale. This must enable them to bring their operations online, and we need to build up their capabilities to ensure that businesses are digitized at the same time as they go digital. The third challenge is access to digital tools. We are present in Africa, Latin America, Asia, and the Middle East. As I said before, more than 2/3 of the ICC is comprised of companies and entities in emerging and developing economies. What we do know from our experience and our work on the ground is that the future of these economies depends on their access to a functioning digital platform. Local businesses need to function in a digitalized business model so as to ensure an economic future for their current and future generations. The COVID-19 crisis showed how digital tools facilitated the survival of those businesses which had access to those tools, particularly SMEs. And by the way, and despite an initial drop of almost 10% in global trade at the beginning of the pandemic, global merchandise supply chains have actually come back and have shown remarkable resilience. But services trade has been very negatively affected and has not come back the same level. You can look at the two balances there. Merchandise trade went down and came straight back up. Services trade has continued to go down as they've been sclerotic at the bottom now as well. Proving how critical it is for service providers to be digitally enabled, and government regulation must support that enabling. Friends, we cannot hope to maintain the trajectory towards greater economic inclusion and away for the increase we're seeing now in global inequality and resilience without digitization. The lack of digital business models is not a localized problem either. It affects developed and developing economies equally. There are regulatory barriers that disincentivize or hamper the digitization of, for example, negotiable instruments, as I said in my opening remarks. Currently, less than 0.1% of bills of lading, that says that 99.9% of bills of lading are not legally recognized because they are digital. So 0.1% is all that's actually digitized here, and that's what we've got. It's what we're stuck with. Wet signatures and physical stamps are required in multiple jurisdictions, creating unnecessary obstacles. The most recent example has been in the developed capital of Tokyo itself. I don't know if you followed the collapse in trading and actually economic activity in Tokyo because of the requirement in a lockdown where people were confined to still present stamped documents with wet stamps on them to actually execute a transaction or to execute a delivery. It actually brought Tokyo almost to a standstill. It's a cautionary tale for us all. This leads me to the fourth challenge that I want to address, the importance for institutions, regional and global institutions, to keep up with technological developments if they want to remain relevant and true to their purpose. For example, we need to promote customs agencies reform, ensuring the legal recognition of digital tools. ICC is working closely with the WTO and the World Customs Organization to move towards a regulatory framework that can accommodate the reality of digital trade. It does not at the moment. It is also critical for global institutions to design rules that cater to the 21st century economy. In a period when governments face difficulties cooperating globally, the coordinated response of the private sector is what is key here. During the last Internet Governance Forum, I advocated for the creation of a stable legal regulatory environment that recognizes ongoing developments and welcomes new entrants into the digital ecosystem. Governments have a role to play on this, and I make three specific recommendations. One, they must implement regulatory policies that provide access to stable financing sources so that digital projects can achieve sustainable returns. Two, they've got to encourage open and transparent competition. And finally, three, promote digital transformation through education and upskilling. None of this are beyond the ability of governments, but none of this is actually being done in a coordinated way at the moment. And that's why we're pushing for it. I'm aware that European institutions are taking steps in this direction, seeking to enhance access to finance for EU SMEs undertaking their digital transformation. Our current initiative to launch ICC Centres of Entrepreneurship worldwide supports this activity. We are cooperating with governments and regional agencies, local chambers of commerce, local businesses and local entrepreneurs to coordinate ongoing efforts to provide entrepreneurs and SMEs with better digital training. This is yet another example of how we can only scale up when we link up. We must scale up and link up existing small and fragmented interventions in various economies through our open ICC platforms of the Centres of Entrepreneurship. Because if we want scale, we want the scale required for impact, we actually have to have open platforms in which we can achieve interoperability, linking up the small fragmented interventions that occur. There is one certainty that I can leave you with. The future of global trade in the 21st century can only be understood with digitization at its heart and with the growing inclusion of cutting-edge technologies like blockchain. The importance of creating an ecosystem that fosters innovation without neglecting interoperability and access lies at the core of the discussion we must have if we want global trade to thrive in an inclusive, forward-looking world. I welcome initiatives like the Democracy for All Forum, which unites policymakers, industry representatives, businesses and entrepreneurs, and gives them a platform to exchange ideas and build together standards that are interoperable, safe, inclusive, and relevant for the future of global trade. You're all now formally part of my global campaign to ensure legal recognition of digital negotiable instruments. And when we've got that done, we'll be ensuring that our platforms available for open scaling, linking up, and enabling the trajectory we require to get the impact we all want and inclusivity. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today.